Welcome, everybody, to Midday Magazine for this Wednesday, July 24th, 2024. I have your host, James J. Maloff here. In part two today, we're going to catch up with our friends from the ODC. We have Lisa and Ashley joining us. Looking forward to that. Right now, in studio, we have Wood County Board Chairman Lance Pliml with us. Lance, good to see you.
James, it's good to be back. I've had a couple of people fill in for me admirably over the past couple of shows because they've had me all over the country, but really glad to be back. It's always a pleasure.
And appreciate you and your staff setting up the interviews for us to have guests come in placement of you. We certainly say a big thank you to our friends at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. Appreciate the gang over there. Do yourself a favor. Go to YouTube, type into your search bar, Wisconsin Rapids Community Media, and subscribe to their page. Keep up to date with the great work they are doing. Lance, I want to talk a little bit about meetings and voting and committees with you. First up, Wood County has purchased four stools short. There is a plan in place for that. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yes. I was laughing. One of the things, I just got back from a national conference. We always talk about transparency, and then we talk about what can be disclosed and what can't be disclosed because of legal ramifications sometimes. But, the long-term plan when we started down that jail project was to obviously provide adequate parking, especially for those with, accessibility issues. And part of that was to bring parking closer to the front of where the new entrance will be in the courthouse. So over the course of time, we've basically acquired all of those properties that would generally be considered across the street from the courthouse. There were a couple law offices there, and the last piece of that was the Four Stools property. So we've been working on that as part of that entire project that you've heard about, that, pick a number, the $90 million with a $10 million contingency. Part of that project was adding that parking to that. So at some point, that will occur. Not immediately. It'll go along in conjunction with raising the old jail and some of the plans that still have to be put together. But that was part of the plan, day one, and now we have acquired all that property across the street, which will allow us to do that.
Is there more planned in that area?
No, there's no more acquisition planned. In that area. There's some reconfiguration, some of the parking and some of the other things down there that currently exist, but no, there'd be no additional acquisition. As
far as you know, how are the planning going? How is the construction going? All the planning for all of this?
Yeah, I can actually answer that accurately. It's really nice when we have guests in here, people that probably provide a lot more information in a specific area or silo than I do. They're experts. I probably know more about the entire county operation than virtually anybody from end to end, but about 2 inches deep. Mm-hmm. And we get people in here who know it, 2 feet deep and maybe a little bit narrower scope. But the reason I brought that up is on the way here, I actually was speaking to the sheriff. And Sean Becker, our sheriff, we have a great sheriff, assured me that we're right on schedule. We're on budget with that new jail. We're anticipating a completion date of around mid-October. I mean, that could go a little earlier, a couple weeks later. And then occupancy around January because it has to go through all the certification processes. That being said, somewhere, hopefully mid-October, late October, we're going to be able to run some open house events for the community so they can see what is there. And those will be controlled, groups of, somewhat what they did at Lincoln High School, if any of you went there, groups of 20, 25 going through with one of the law enforcement officers so you can see that entire operation. Many law enforcement groups and other special groups have already toured the facility. I don't know if you've had a chance to do that yet.
No. Planning on it.
If you haven't, we'll get you. We'll get you. You want to go to the No, we'll get you in there. But no, that's right on schedule, right on budget, and part of that entire plan is coming along great. Part of that was we really had great weather this winter. Mm-hmm. And then when we've had a really wet spring, everything was already under roof. So it really didn't slow us down.
We got lucky with that. It was nice of Mother Nature to work with us on that one.
Yeah, we had a call in and it worked out great.
You mentioned Sheriff Becker and something that Sean and I have talked about a lot. One of them actually doing a tour. We're looking forward to that. We're going to come down there. We might even drag Wisconsin Rapids Community Media with us while we do it too. But one of the things him and I have talked about endlessly, almost our first conversation, was building more of a bridge and a stronger relationship between law enforcement and our community. And with this open house, I think we have an opportunity to even do that even more. Just people, everyday citizens coming to the jail. More than likely, a lot of citizens that may not know what a jail looks like or know what our law enforcement goes through inside that jail. It's going to give them a little empathy, a little insight into that, while also just kind of it being interesting. I mean, this is a project that you know better than I do, is decades in the making.
And I can't compliment our sheriff and our sheriff's department enough. And it's really interesting because I just returned, I was sharing this from the National Association of Counties annual conference. Happened to be in Tampa, beautiful place to go in July. If it wasn't hot enough here, let's go to Tampa.
Oh, you poor thing.
I was sharing. I said I actually had flights. It was kind of funny, from Madison, Chicago to Tampa, Tampa to Dallas, Dallas to Denver, Denver to Vail, back to Denver, and in for some conferences. And every one of my flights was on time. And then I'm looking at friends that are still stuck somewhere because of the Microsoft glitch. But the point was, we discussed those relationships with law enforcement. And not every county across the country has the relationship that our board and generally our other law enforcement agencies within the county have with our sheriff's department. And that's a direct result of Sheriff Becker and his staff. They do a tremendous job of what I would call community policing. They get out there. When we went out to build the jail, we didn't just say we're going to build a jail and ram it down your throat. We made numerous appearances throughout the county, engage the whole community, say, what should we do? How should we do it? Sheriff Becker and his department do that with everybody. And it really came to light, segue here a little bit. We had the largest water ski tournament in the world here last week. And not only are our sworn deputies out there that you see regularly, but our reserve deputies were out there. And there was an interaction that occurred between two of those reserve deputies and some people who were sitting in the stands right in front of me. And they contacted them a couple of times, and eventually whatever the issue was resolved. And when they walked away, after that particular show was over, I walked up to that person who was here, a guest of our county, and I said, "Can I, if you don't mind me asking?" I didn't tell him who I was. I said, "If you don't mind me asking, what were they up to?" And he said, "They asked us a couple of questions." He goes, "We answered." He goes, "They couldn't have been more congenial. They couldn't have been better trained." He said, "I have nothing to do but compliment the sheriff." I said, "Well, that's good to hear because I happen to be your county board chairman." I think he thought I was going to get on the police stuff, but and I shared that with the sheriff yesterday. I said, whether it's those reserve deputies in the parks, those community efforts that we make, getting them out doing the community policing, it's been past exceptional. I just can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah, we're very appreciative, and I'll always enjoy the time with him. Sheriff Becker will be joining us at the beginning of next month. Looking forward to that, as we always do. And great to hear about the project on time, everything rolling smoothly when it comes to that. And Lance, what I was saying about Sheriff Becker, you and I have a bit of a passion project as well. We'll get to in a moment about getting more and more people involved on community boards and some of that. But you mentioned this conference that took you away from us for a while here, and you had to spend time in Florida, you poor thing. Actually, I've always wanted to go to Florida.
If you went to Florida, in October, November, December, if it wasn't hot enough here, you should have come to Tampa with me.
It sounds like it. What other things did you discuss or learn from the conference?
Well, what you find at those conferences, there are so many breakout sessions in regard to things that, it's not ironic. You would expect it, but what we find challenging in Wood County is found challenging across every one of the counties in the country. And so right now, those issues tend to focus on mental health, on human services issues, on, to some extent, homelessness, which in and of itself creates a whole bunch of other issues with law enforcement and how to handle those. But mental health, that aspect, those are really big right now. I would guess that the vast majority of sessions probably revolve around that to some extent. On the periphery, it might be the health involved with, the health department's involved with that aspect of it, economic development, and how does that work when you have, there's some cities that are facing some real challenges, not necessarily Wisconsin, but, go to Portland. Used to be just a jewel. I love to go to Portland. If you go to downtown Portland right now, you're stepping over, oftentimes, again, I don't want to get pigeonholed, but a drug-addicted, homeless person laying in every doorway of every business downtown. And it gets very, very difficult to attract business and to have spur any economic development. And so one of the things we want to make sure doesn't happen in our area, or Wisconsin, for that matter, is to deal with those issues ahead of that crisis. And so a lot of those breakout sessions deal with that. And then the other part of that is election of those officers that serve at a national level. So you have, I forget, 3,300 counties roughly in the United States, and you probably had 2,700 of them represented at that conference. So it's a huge conference. It would be nice if we actually sent more people. I kind of go under the guise of president of the Counties Association. The state sends me. But there's so much to learn and so much you could garner. It's nice when you send a few people
Yeah.
catch some of those.
It's interesting you bring up what's going on with Portland. This is a subject I know quite a bit about. I've researched homelessness my whole life. I grew up around homeless people. It's a very important topic to me. And part of the reason Portland is in that situation is not working with other states. California gets an overflux. They just keep pushing homeless people to another town. They keep doing that. It ends up in Portland. Portland keeps doing that. Washington is dealing with issues. So you bring up these conferences and how important they are working with other communities, other cities. While there is no one-size-fits-all for any one community, I can imagine that it's that much more vital to share that information when it comes to topics like that. That is a traveling topic. There is no, putting this under the rug or under the bed. You've got to deal with these situations. You can't just keep kicking the can, as we've learned with our jail and other things.
Yeah, it's how do you handle it? And part of the reason some of those cities have those issues, to some extent, is climate. I mean, let's face it, if I don't have a dwelling to live in, I might pick somewhere that's not 20 below zero. So they tend to gravitate to those areas. And then some of it is just there are some laws in some of those states or policies that have probably exacerbated the problem, but they're there to learn as well, and how they address that. And at the same time, minimize the impact to the taxpayer while they're doing that. I mean, could you literally house every person who's homeless, in New York or Chicago in a luxury hotel? Probably could, but that doesn't necessarily help the overall economic.
It doesn't solve the
situation.
problem.
It doesn't solve the problem, and it probably makes it worse because one becomes a burden on the taxpayer. The other one is the taxpayer who then vacates that area, and you've seen that out migration from some of those areas that have had those problems. So everybody's there with the common goal is to solve it.
And really, we've had the lesson the whole time. You teach a man to fish. As far as funding and some of these things, the biggest thing you can do is trying to look at a homeless person as an actual human being, or a person who is struggling with addiction as a human being, like you would hope to be looked at yourself. And handling them that way and dealing with it that way, you all of a sudden are going to start coming up with more solutions of how to handle it. And before you know it, you have a future taxpayer that is going to help your economy.
Yeah, and that's the reason we have things like our drug court, why we're establishing our mental health courts and some veterans courts, things like that. We know that part of that population, it can be physical, it can be mental challenges, or any of the myriad of mental health issues. I mean, we see that, and that's certainly a big part of the problem. But it's also a separate part of the problem from some who just choose, believe it or not. I mean, there's somewhere we've approached that, hey, we have a bed and we have a place you can, take care of personal hygiene and do those other things, and some of them aren't interested, which, again, I guess in America you get to make a choice. But
statistically, that's less than 15% of homeless people.
Yeah, but yet, I mean, it's still, when
Just
you take
saying.
a nationwide issue, the numbers become fairly high. So, so when we go to these conferences, those breakout sessions, typically with more so than the board chairs like myself who set policy, are those health department directors, human services directors who really can delve into those issues. And then they bring that information back to policymakers who you hope are willing to listen and then smart enough to adopt those policies.
When you're talking with other people and from other community leaders from other communities, other states, how often is it that you guys are finding some likeness, some kinship? You mentioned it, how similar problems here can be similar in other states. Are you finding, I don't want to say solutions to our issues here from other places, but influence or maybe ideas that you can springboard from?
Yeah, the problems are generally identical. And I always laugh because somebody says, well, we're bigger, or in some cases it might be small. And I said, well, add a couple zeros or subtract a zero from the number, and we're in the same place you are. Somebody say, you don't understand, our budget is X. I said, well, take a couple zeros off and leave ours where it is, and then, make the adjustments mathematically, and we're right where you are. So the problems are unbelievably similar across the entire country. And then solutions are oftentimes far and few between. But don't think that people aren't trying every day to address it.
And that's how we come up with, so we get solutions, to keep trying and sharing information. And it's good to hear. It's very good to hear. Well, we missed you. It sounds like you made good use of the time, man.
Well, those are always extremely beneficial conferences. I always say if we can come back with one idea. I'm going to give you an example. This has nothing to do with the National Association of Counties, but years ago, our county parks committee went to the Wisconsin County Forest Association annual tour. And at the time, our county was, maybe deriving somewhere a little bit under $100,000 in timber revenues. And we went to those conferences for years, and over time we realized there might be some better practices. And so it probably cost us, by the time you rolled in hotels and transportation, it might have cost $1,200, maybe even $2,000 to send those officials to that conference. But our timber revenues went from $100,000 to, in our best years, we pushed $700,000. So, I don't know about you at home with your checkbook, but I am willing to give anybody $2,000 in exchange for $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. So anytime anybody wants to make that trade, feel free to give me a call, and we'll work on it. But that's a real result of being there and actually seeing and talking to those people. And so sometimes there's a little bit of expense on the front end, but you really hope it comes back on the back end in return on investment.
We've experienced that a bit in this town with our water, our splash pads, our water parks, some of those things, and even the jail in many ways is a return on an investment, as we've talked about endlessly with Sheriff Becker, whose ears are burning this morning. We're sending people out of city and having to be charged for that, and now not having to worry about those things. There's a lot of add-ins on this, so that's interesting.
Yeah, when you transport literally 100 prisoners on average every month for 10 years, the cost of millions of dollars, not to mention I'll call it the inconvenience, the factor of getting them into court, getting them out of court. When we ran those numbers, there was about a $25 million savings over 25 years by building a new jail. Now, that sometimes can be hard to explain to people, but when they rolled the numbers, I said, yeah, it's something you have to do.
Lance Pliml joining us, Wood County Board Chairman, and of course our friends at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media with us. Lance, I was looking at the Wood County website. You can do that yourself at woodcountywi.gov. Encourage you to do so. You guys have a Land Information Council meeting at 9 this morning. Were you a part of that?
No, I was not a part of that. It's in another meeting. In fact, tomorrow I think I even have to be up in Antigo for a tourism meeting, and then a human services meeting up in Marshfield later that day. You'd like to get to all of them if you can.
Yeah.
But, everything we do kind of ties together. You mentioned it with whether it be splash pads, the new bike trails, and one-track systems up at Powers Bluff, the water ski tournament. We just had 20,000 plus visitors in town. Those all equate to economic development, not only in the dollars they spend in tourism, but the fact that it's your best foot forward. When people come to the community, you see you have that. Now, when we talk to people who are looking at relocating a business into the area, I think they take for granted the fact that Wisconsin generally has pretty good education and pretty good transportation system, much better than many different states. The question they always ask is recreation, because people are now having their lives revolve around those wants and more than they necessarily are some of the other things. It's like, do you have a rock climbing wall? Do you have a splash pad? Do you have a pool? Do you have
dogs?
Yeah,
dogs. Do you have a dog
things.
park? Do you like dogs?
Do you have beaches? Do you have boat launches? Yeah, it's
for the last 10 years. One of the most interesting stats to me are the communities all across the whole country that are growing. The most common theme they all have: dog friendly. Like every one of them, they're dog friendly, and they have seen an increase in their populations. It's crazy to think, you wouldn't think of it right away, but I thought that was an interesting thing to have.
As you see, maybe a direct correlation. I've actually never studied this for anybody out there listening, but as you see a direct correlation in family size, which has been reduced over the decades. Many of those people have opted for a pet in replacement of that child or those two kids, part of their family. So so we look at all those things as, how does recreation and lifestyle, I shouldn't even say recreation, but how does lifestyle fit into who we attract? Mm-hmm. And those are the things, you believe it or not, that's what they ask about. When I was in Tampa, somebody who was there was from a nearby state and said, you have the best BMX track in the Midwest. Now, this is funny because I'm aware of the track. I've been out there. But I don't remember where they're from. Could have been Indiana, Michigan, or somewhere near Iowa. They said, why don't you guys put that under roof and run that 12 months a year? You'd have every national event. And I'm going, I never thought of it. Mm-hmm. I'm not involved with that. And obviously there's an economic component to that. Mm-hmm. That in itself might not be a terrible idea.
No.
You see what they do at the golf domes and some of the other recreation. something I never thought of. I would have never
great
thought of
idea.
it till somebody mentioned it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I wouldn't have thought of it either.
it's
And
not a
I've
county
got-
facility, but we'll certainly talk about it with the people in charge.
Yeah, I've got a lot of friends that do that. I know how much that has grown in this community because of that bike track. That is a great idea, and I wouldn't have thought of it either. It's a great point, and great to hear from our leaders that they're listening. You know, I don't think that we could ever hear that enough. No pun intended. It's great to hear, man.
No, and you've heard me talk about it. We love community involvement. We get those ideas from the community, and that's the one thing. Though I occasionally I hear some public officials, and I've been pretty lucky, they get raked over the coals because they say the official's doing nothing. And I'll use an example. It might be solar farms. Local officials, make this really clear. Local officials have zero authority, nothing to say about where those are placed. Those are public service commissions. No matter what you put in place, you can do nothing about it. There's other things that are very similar in nature where the local public official doesn't get to tell you what we're doing. I mean, we personally can have a feeling, but no matter what I do at the county board is not going to affect our immigration policy at the border, nor is it going to affect our nuclear capabilities. So we try to deal with what we have in Wood County. And sometimes people think, well, you're not being transparent. You're not telling me. They're being transparent. They're disclosing everything they can disclose, but it's not within your wheelhouse. Yeah. And so it's amazing when you listen to those sometimes you go, I wish I could do something.
Yeah, right.
I can sit here and get yelled at for a while.
Right. We, as always, as I mentioned, a passion project of ours, we want to encourage people to get out there, be a part of their board meetings, attend these board meetings. If you can't be there in person, well, our great friends at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media record these. You can find them right at their website, along with our interviews and plenty of more great coverage. Again, follow along with them on YouTube at WisconsinRapidsCommunityMedia.com. Support those that support us and support this community, much like Mr. Pliml does. Lance, always good talking with you. If people have follow-up questions, they want to give you some of those ideas or anything else, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, my information is on the county website. That's probably the easiest way. If I repeated it, you wouldn't remember it. But if you go to the Wood County website, you can Google Wood County, Wisconsin. It'll get you to the website. My phone numbers are on there, my email addresses and all the rest. And I couldn't have said it better than you just did, James.
Now that I think about it, we've been doing this for years, and I don't even remember your number. I should. Yeah. You would think I would. I hear it all the time.
It's pretty easy, yeah. But I repeat it never, but nobody remembers. But it is there.
WoodCountyWI.gov is the website. WoodCountyWI.gov. Thanks again, everybody. Appreciate the time today. We'll be back with more Midday Magazine right here at 97.5 FM, 1320 AM, WFHR, locally grown radio.